Ambassador Yelen Vasquez stood alone near the tall windows of Concord Station Prime. Beyond the glass, stars burned in the endless dark. Ships moved between them like fireflies. Some were small trading vessels. Others were massive warships with hulls that glowed with energy shields. Yelen had worked here for 6 years. 6 years of smiling at aliens who looked at her like she was a trained animal doing tricks. 6 years of bowing her head while ancient species laughed at everything humanity had built. The Galactic Concord was old. 1,800 different species lived under its laws. They had traveled between stars when humans still lived in caves. They had built empires, fought wars, and created technologies that seemed like magic. Plasma weapons that could melt mountains. Shields made of pure energy. Ships that bent space itself to move faster than light. And then there was humanity. The newcomers. The children. Earth had joined the Concord 40 years ago. Humans had expected wonder and friendship. Instead, they found something worse than hatred. They found pity. The older species looked at human technology the way an adult looks at a child's drawing. They smiled and nodded, but they did not take it seriously. The door behind Yelen opened with a soft hiss. She turned to see High Speaker Kethral enter the room. He was an Arxelian, a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His people had founded the Concord 12,000 years ago. They considered themselves the wise elders of the galaxy. Ambassador Vasquez, Kethral said. His voice came through a translator device on his chest. The Assembly has reviewed your request. Yelen kept her face calm. And what did they decide? Your offer to send human warships to the front lines has been declined. She had expected this answer, but it still hurt to hear it. High Speaker, the Dominion has already destroyed 12 of your worlds. Billions are dead. You need every ship you can get. Kethral made a sound that might have been a sigh. We need useful ships, Ambassador. Your vessels carry kinetic weapons, metal projectiles pushed by magnetic force. He spoke the words slowly, like he was explaining something to a child. The galaxy stopped using such primitive methods. 10,000 years ago, your ships would be destroyed in seconds against Dominion plasma cannons. Our railguns are more powerful than you think. I am sure they are impressive by your standards. Kethral's 4 arms folded across his chest. But this is a real war, Ambassador. Not a place for experiments with outdated technology. Your ships may assist with refugee transport and supply delivery. That is the Assembly's final decision. Number 4. All. Number 4. Number 4. He turned and left without waiting for her response. Yelen stood alone again, her hands closed into fists at her sides. She wanted to scream. She wanted to grab one of those arrogant aliens and shake them until they understood. But she had learned long ago that anger changed nothing. Her communicator buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket and saw a message from Admiral Chen Wei, commander of Earth's defense fleet. I heard the news, the message read. Come to the Longinus. We need to talk. 2 hours later, Yelen stepped off a shuttle and onto the deck of the UES Longinus. It was humanity's newest and largest warship. 2 kilometers of steel and determination. The crew moved around her with purpose, checking systems and running drills. Admiral Chen Wei waited in the command center. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. At 62 years old, she had spent her entire adult life in Earth's military. They said no, Yelen said. Chen Wei nodded. I knew they would. They have been saying no to us for 40 years. She turned to a display screen on the wall. It showed the current war situation. Red markers showed Dominion territory. It was spreading like a disease across the map. The Vethkai Dominion has conquered more than any enemy in Concord history, Chen Wei said. Their ships are fast. Their weapons are powerful. But their greatest advantage is the world breaker. The screen changed to show an image that made Yelen's stomach turn cold. It was a ship the size of a small moon, dark and covered with weapons. That thing has destroyed 3 planets already. Chen Wei continued. The Concorde's best weapons cannot scratch it. Its shields absorb energy attacks, like a sponge absorbs water. Plasma, graviton beams, quantum disruptors. Nothing works. Then, how can we help? If their technology cannot stop it, what chance do we have? Chen Wei smiled. It was a strange smile. The kind of smile a person wears when they know a secret. Their shields stop energy, she said. They were designed to stop energy. For 10,000 years, every species in this galaxy has fought with energy weapons, so every defense was built to stop energy weapons. She walked to another screen and pulled up technical data. But we never got the message that kinetic weapons were outdated. We kept building them. We kept improving them. Yellen looked at the data. It showed the Longinus's main weapon, a magnetic accelerator that ran the entire length of the ship. It could fire a 10-ton tungsten slug at 3% of the speed of light. You think a metal slug can do what their best weapons cannot? Energy can be absorbed. Energy can be redirected. Energy can be stopped. Chen Wei's eyes were bright, with something dangerous. But a 10-ton piece of tungsten moving at 9,000 kilometers per second? That is not energy, Ambassador. That is just physics. Simple, brutal physics. And physics does not care about shields. Yellen stared at the Admiral for a long moment. The Assembly will never let us try. Then perhaps, Chen Wei said quietly, we will not ask for permission. The planet Thessar Prime was beautiful beyond words. Its surface was covered with cities made of crystal that caught the light of 2 suns and scattered it into rainbows. Rivers of silver water flowed between towers that had stood for 50,000 years. 12 billion Thessari called it home. The Thessari were the oldest members of the Galactic Concorde. They had been traveling between stars when most species were still learning to use fire. Their libraries held knowledge from 1,000,000 worlds. Their diplomats had prevented countless wars. They believed in peace, in wisdom, in the slow, patient work of building a better galaxy. Now the Dominion had come to burn it all. Admiral Chen Wei watched the battle from the bridge of the Longinus. Her ship sat at the edge of the Thessar system, far from the fighting. The Concorde had ordered all human vessels to stay back. They were only allowed to watch. On the main screen, 4,000 warships formed a wall between the Dominion fleet and the planet. They were the best ships from 7 different species. Their weapons lit up space with beams of plasma and gravity. For a moment, it almost looked like they might win. Then the Worldbreaker arrived. It came through a tear in space itself, a moon-sized mountain of dark metal and terrible weapons. Smaller Dominion ships moved around it like insects around a giant. The thing blocked out the stars behind it. All Concorde ships, came a voice over the communication channels. It was Admiral Sevnal, a Thessari commander. His voice was calm but tired. Focus all fire on the enemy flagship. We stop it here, or we stop it nowhere. Thousands of weapons fired at once. Plasma beams bright enough to blind sensors. Graviton cannons that could crush asteroids. Quantum disruptors that tore at the fabric of reality itself. The greatest weapons ever built by the most advanced species in the galaxy, all aimed at one target. The Worldbreaker did not slow down. Chen Wei watched the energy readings with cold anger. The Dominion ship's shields were absorbing everything. The attacks splashed against it like water against stone. All that power, all that technology, and it did nothing. Admiral, said Lieutenant Park, her weapons officer. Our orders are to maintain position. But the Longinus is ready. The main gun is charged. I know, Chen Wei said. I know. On the screen, the battle was turning into a slaughter. Concorde ships exploded one after another as the Worldbreaker's weapons tore through them. The Dominion vessel pushed forward through the broken fleet like a shark swimming through small fish. A new transmission came through. It was High Speaker Kethral, broadcasting from Concorde Station Prime. His voice was heavy with defeat. To the Veth Kai Dominion. The Galactic Concord requests immediate ceasefire negotiations. We are prepared to discuss terms of MESE. The transmission cut off as the Worldbreaker began charging its main weapon. Chen Wei had seen recordings of what that weapon could do. It was called a planet cracker. The name was not poetry. It was simple description. Admiral. Lieutenant Park's voice was tight. They are going to fire on the planet. 12 billion people. Chen Wei closed her eyes for 1 second. She thought about her orders. She thought about the assembly, and their rules, and their certainty that humans had nothing useful to offer. She thought about what would happen if she disobeyed. Then she thought about 12 billion people dying while she watched and did nothing. Helm, she said. Her voice was steady. Take us in. Full speed toward the Worldbreaker. The bridge went silent. Every officer turned to look at her. Admiral, said her first officer, Commander Torres. Our orders. I know our orders. Chen Wei opened her eyes. I am choosing to ignore them. Anyone who wants to leave their post may do so now. I will not force anyone to follow me into a court-martial. Nobody moved. Very well. Chen Wei sat back in her command chair. Lieutenant Park, begin calculations for a main gun firing solution. We will have one shot. We will not miss. The Longinus turned and accelerated toward the battle. Its engines burned hot as it dove into the chaos of the fight. Concord commanders screamed at them over the radio, ordering them to turn back. Dominion interceptors broke off to chase the small human ship. But Chen Wei was not trying to get close. She was trying to get angle. The Worldbreaker was still pointed at the planet. Its shields focused forward. She needed a clear line to its side, where the targeting would be easier. Enemy interceptors closing, Torres reported. 30 seconds to weapons range. Time to firing position? 45 seconds. Chen Wei did not change expression. Then, we will be taking some hits. All hands. Brace for impact. The first plasma bolt struck the Longinus's shields. Alarms screamed. The ship shook. But the human vessel kept flying forward, kept pushing toward its target. On the screen, the Worldbreaker's main weapon reached full charge. In moments, it would fire. Thessar Prime would die. Firing position reached. Park shouted. Chen Wei leaned forward. Fire. The Longinus shook as its main gun fired. There was no bright beam of light. No dramatic flash of energy. Just a deep vibration that every person on the ship felt in their bones as 2 kilometers of magnetic accelerator threw a 10-ton piece of tungsten into the void. The slug was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It was just a long rod of dense metal, shaped to cut through space with minimum resistance. It left the Longinus at 9,000 kilometers per second, 3% of the speed of light. At that velocity, the journey to the Worldbreaker would take 3.7 seconds. Admiral Chen Wei counted in her head. 1, 2, 3. Nothing seemed to happen. On every command channel, voices were still shouting. Conquered admirals demanded that the Longinus withdraw. Dominion officers laughed at the human ship's foolish charge. The Worldbreaker's planet cracker cannon continued its countdown to firing. Nobody noticed the slug. The Dominion sensors were designed to track energy signatures, radiation patterns, quantum fluctuations. They were built to detect the weapons that the galaxy had used for 10,000 years. A solid piece of metal, moving very fast, did not register as a threat. It barely registered at all. The tungsten rod hit the Worldbreaker's port side at a slight angle. It struck the shields first. The shields were masterpieces of Dominion engineering. Layers of force fields designed to absorb plasma, redirect graviton beams, and scatter quantum disruptions. They had stopped the combined fire of 4,000 warships. They were the strongest defensive systems ever built. They were completely useless against kinetic impact. The slug passed through the shields like they were made of air. The fields were not designed to stop physical objects. Why would they be? Nobody used physical objects as weapons anymore. That was primitive. That was outdated. That was stupid. That was the last mistake the Worldbreaker's designers ever made. The tungsten penetrator hit the hull at 9,000 kilometers per second. At that speed, metal behaves like liquid. The impact point vaporized instantly, turning into a spray of superheated gas that was hotter than the surface of a star. The slug did not stop. It did not slow. It carved a tunnel of destruction through the Worldbreaker's outer armor, through its inner compartments, through its crew quarters, where thousands of Dominion soldiers died before they could even understand what was happening. The rod reached the ship's reactor core. It passed through it. The rod reached the charging planet cracker cannon. It passed through that too. The rod exited through the Worldbreaker's stern in a fountain of molten metal and crystallized atmosphere. Behind it, the most powerful warship in the galaxy was dying. The reactor went first. It exploded in a ball of blue fire that consumed everything within 1,000 meters. Then the ammunition stores caught. Then the fuel lines. Then the planet cracker cannon, its charge suddenly unstable, released its energy in all directions at once instead of at its target. From start to finish, the Worldbreaker died in 17 seconds. A ship the size of a moon, crewed by 50,000 soldiers, destroyed by a piece of metal that had cost less than a single Concorde fighter. Silence fell across every command channel in the system. Admiral Chen Wei sat very still in her chair. Her bridge crew stared at their screens with wide eyes. On the tactical display, the red marker representing the Worldbreaker flickered and disappeared. "Direct hit," Lieutenant Park whispered. Her voice was shaking. "Target destroyed." The silence stretched on. Nobody in the entire battle seemed able to speak. Concorde admirals who had been screaming orders went quiet. Dominion commanders who had been laughing stopped. Every sensor in the system was pointed at the expanding cloud of debris that had been the galaxy's most feared weapon. Then a single voice came through the communications channel. It was Admiral Sevnal, the Thessari commander, who had been preparing to watch his homeworld die. "What?" His translator could barely process his emotions. "What did you do? What weapon was that?" Chen Wei took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice was carried to every ship in the system. "It was a railgun, Admiral. A magnetic accelerator. It fires metal slugs at high velocity." She paused. "Humans have been building them for 200 years. More silence. Then, chaos. The Dominion fleet began to scatter. Ships that had been advancing broke formation and turned away. They had never seen their greatest weapon destroyed. They had never even imagined it was possible. Now they were running, driven by pure animal fear of something they could not understand. The Concorde ships did not chase them. They were too shocked to move. On Thessar Prime, 12 billion people who had been preparing to die looked up at the sky and saw the debris cloud of their would-be killer spreading across the stars. And on the bridge of the Longinus, Chen Wei allowed herself to close her eyes. They would court-martial her for this. They would strip her rank and throw her in prison. She had disobeyed direct orders, violated Concorde military law, and taken unilateral action in a war zone. Her career was over. But 12 billion people were alive. She decided she could live with that trade. "Admiral," Torres said softly, "we are receiving transmission requests. Hundreds of them. From every Concorde fleet commander in the system." Chen Wei opened her eyes. "What do they want?" Torres looked at his screen. His face showed something between disbelief and wonder. "They want to know how we did it. They want to know if we can do it again." He looked up at her. "Admiral, they want to know if we can teach them." The video spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species, with access to the galactic network, watched it. A small human warship, tiny compared to the giants around it, diving through plasma fire. A flash of motion, almost too fast to see. And then the impossible. The Worldbreaker, the terror of 100 systems, dying in less than 20 seconds. Scientists watched it and ran calculations that made their heads hurt. Military commanders watched it and felt their certainties crumble. Politicians watched it and immediately began making new plans. On Concord Station Prime, the assembly gathered for an emergency session. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from hundreds of species. They spoke over each other in a chaos of languages and translator static. High Speaker Kethril stood at the center podium, trying to restore order. His 4 arms waved for silence. Nobody listened. "This is madness," shouted the Vorn ambassador, a creature of living crystal. "The humans violated direct orders. They must be punished." Punished? The Thessari High Matriarch rose from her seat. She was old, even by Thessari standards, with silver skin and eyes that had watched empires rise and fall. "Ambassador, those humans saved 12 billion of my people. If you wish to punish them, you will do so over my formal objection. They used a weapon of mass destruction without authorization. They used a weapon that worked." The High Matriarch's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "While our plasma cannons did nothing. While our graviton beams failed. While our quantum disruptors proved useless. A human ship with primitive technology did what we could not." The hall went quiet. The High Matriarch walked slowly to the center of the room. Every eye followed her. "For 10,000 years," she said, "we believed we had perfected war. We developed energy weapons because they were elegant. We built shields to stop energy, because that was what everyone used. We created a system where every species fought the same way, with the same tools, following the same rules." She turned in a slow circle, looking at each delegation in turn. "And in our arrogance, we forgot something basic. Something that humans, in their youth, still remembered." She paused. "Physics does not care about elegance. The universe does not reward sophistication. A rock moving fast enough will destroy anything in its path. This is not advanced science. This is the first lesson of existence." From the back of the hall, Ambassador Yellen Vasquez watched in silence. Beside her, Admiral Chen Wei stood in formal uniform, her hands clasped behind her back. They had been summoned to face judgment. Instead, they were witnessing a transformation. "I move," the High Matriarch continued, "that all charges against Admiral Chen Wei be dropped. Further, I move that Earth be granted full military partnership status in the Concord Defense Initiative. And finally, I move that we begin immediate study of kinetic weapon technology for integration into our fleets." The voting was not even close. Within hours, the news spread further. The Vethkai Dominion, the conquerors who had never known defeat, requested a ceasefire. Their ambassadors spoke carefully chosen words about peace and negotiation. But everyone could see the truth in their compound eyes. They were afraid. The Dominion had built their entire military around energy weapons. Their ships, their tactics, their training, all of it assumed that enemies would fight with plasma and gravity beams. The shields that made them invincible were worthless against kinetic weapons. One human ship had killed their greatest weapon. What would 100 do? 1,000? They did not want to find out. In the weeks that followed, Admiral Chen Wei found herself busier than she had ever been in her life. Delegations from dozens of species came to the Longinus to study its main gun. Engineers asked endless questions. Scientists ran tests. Military officers sat through lectures on magnetic acceleration and projectile physics. Some of them struggled to understand. They had spent their entire careers thinking in terms of energy output and field harmonics. The idea of throwing metal very fast seemed almost insultingly simple. "That is the point," Chen Wei told a room full of Arxelian weapons designers. "Your technology became so advanced that you forgot the basics. You built shields to stop energy because energy is what you used. But you cannot stop a solid object with an energy field. You have to actually block it. And blocking something moving at 3% of light speed requires more mass than most ships carry. But surely," one designer said, "more advanced shields could be developed. Shields that affect physical matter, perhaps, and then we will build bigger guns, faster projectiles, heavier slugs." Chen Wei smiled. "That is the nature of war. It is not about finding perfect defense. It is about staying ahead of your enemy. You spent 10,000 years advancing in one direction. We spent 200 years advancing in another. Today, that difference saved a planet. Ambassador Vasquez received 1,700 requests for military alliance in the first week alone. Species that had ignored humanity for decades suddenly wanted to be friends. Trade offers arrived by the hour. Cultural exchange programs were proposed. Research partnerships were suggested. Humanity's seat in the Concord Assembly was moved from the back row to the center circle. On Earth, the news was met with a mixture of pride and caution. Governments understood that their position had changed. They were no longer the primitive newcomers to be pitied and ignored. They were valuable. They were wanted. That kind of attention brought its own dangers. But for now, Yellen allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten in 6 years of diplomatic work: hope. 5 years had passed since the shot that changed everything. Fleet Admiral Chen Wei stood on the observation deck of her new flagship, the UES Longinus II. The ship was a monster, 20 kilometers long, built in orbital shipyards that had been funded by 30 different species. Its hull was a mixture of human steel, Thessari crystal, and Arxelian alloys. Its main gun could accelerate a 100-ton projectile to 5% of light speed. But Chen Wei was not looking at her ship. She was looking at the fleet around it. 800 warships hung in formation above the blue-green world of Thessar Prime. They came from a dozen species. Human dreadnoughts flew beside Thessari cruisers. Arxelian carriers shared space with Vorn destroyers. And all of them, every single one, carried the same weapons that had once been called primitive: railguns, mass drivers, kinetic accelerators, different names from different cultures, but the same basic idea. Throw metal very fast. Let physics do the rest. The Concorde had learned its lesson. Admiral. Commander Torres stepped up beside her. His hair had gone gray in the past 5 years, but his eyes were still sharp. The delegates are assembled in the conference room. Chen Wei nodded. Is Ambassador Vasquez there? She was the first to arrive. They walked together through the corridors of the massive ship. Crew members saluted as they passed. Some were human. Others had scales, or crystal skin, or too many limbs. The Longinus II had a mixed crew now, officers from half a dozen species serving side by side. The conference room was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Yellen Vasquez sat at the head of the table, her hair now touched with silver, but her presence as commanding as ever. She had been promoted 3 times since that day above Thessar Prime. Now she was Secretary General of the Concord Diplomatic Corps. Beside her sat High Speaker Kethral, looking older and somehow smaller than Chen Wei remembered. The war had changed him. It had changed everyone. But the most interesting guests sat at the far end of the table. 3 Vethkai delegates, their insectoid bodies held very still, their compound eyes watching everything. The Dominion had not surrendered. They had done something more difficult. They had changed. Their new government spoke of trade instead of conquest. Their shipyards built merchant vessels instead of planet crackers. They had even begun developing their own kinetic weapons, buying designs from human corporations. It had taken time. Trust was hard to build after so much death. But slowly, carefully, the galaxy was finding a new balance. Welcome, everyone, Vasquez said. We are here to finalize the Thessar Accords. These agreements will establish new rules for weapons development, military cooperation, and conflict resolution across Concord space. The discussions that followed were long and complex. Diplomats argued about details. Military officers debated specifications. Scientists raised concerns about escalation. Chen Wei listened quietly. Her job was not to negotiate. Her job was to remind everyone what happened when negotiations failed. After 3 hours, the accords were signed. The delegates stood and exchanged formal greetings. The Vethkai ambassador approached Chen Wei with careful, measured steps. Admiral, he said through his translator. My government wishes me to express something. Chenvi waited. 5 years ago, you destroyed the World Breaker. You killed many of my people. For a long time, we hated you for this. The ambassador's mandibles clicked in a pattern that might have been emotion. But you also taught us something important. We built our empire on the belief that we had the greatest weapons, the best shields, the most advanced technology. You showed us that we were wrong. I take no pleasure in what happened that day, Chen Wei said. I know. That is why I am telling you this. The ambassador bowed his head slightly. We are a proud species. Learning humility has been difficult. But we are learning, and perhaps, in time, we will become better for it. He moved away to join his delegation. Chen Wei watched him go. Later, after the ceremonies were finished and the delegates had returned to their ships, Chen Wei found herself alone on the observation deck again. The fleet was breaking formation, vessels moving off to their various duties. Below, Thessar Prime turned slowly, its crystal cities catching the light of twin suns. Torres found her there an hour later. You should get some rest, Admiral. Tomorrow is going to be busy. It is always busy. Chen Wei smiled slightly. Do you remember what this galaxy was like when we first arrived? They laughed at us. Called us primitives. Said our weapons were outdated relics. I remember. Now they build our weapons, study our tactics, ask for our advice. One shot, Torres said. That is what they say now. One shot changed the fate of the galaxy. Chen Wei turned to look at him. Is that what they say? In every bar, on every station, in every fleet. The story of the Longinus and the World Breaker. They teach it in military academies, from here to the galactic core. The shot did not change anything, Chen Wei said quietly. It just reminded everyone of something they had forgotten. The universe does not care about elegance or sophistication or how advanced you think you are. It cares about results, about what works. She looked back at the stars. Humans remembered that because we never had the chance to forget. We were too young, too new, too busy surviving. And now? Now we have to make sure we do not make the same mistake the others did. We cannot let success make us arrogant. We cannot assume that because kinetic weapons worked once, they will work forever. She straightened her shoulders. The galaxy keeps changing. We have to change with it. Torres nodded. They stood together in silence, watching the fleet disperse among the stars. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between galaxies, there were threats that none of them could imagine. Enemies that had never heard of the Concord, or the Dominion, or the small blue planet called Earth. Challenges that would make the war with the Vethkai look like a minor disagreement. But for now, there was peace. There was hope. And there was a galaxy that had learned, the hard way, never to underestimate a species that threw rocks very fast. Admiral Chen Wei smiled. It was a good start.